Little Archie, issue 101, Trick or Treat. Sabrina says tomorrow's Halloween, and Zelda says she loves to buy the candy. She hears some kids talking, and one of them says that everyone says that house is haunted. Zelda takes a walk holding the grocery bags to check out the house, and sees that he's talking about her house. Probably because the witches there are so obvious about magic that the neighbors started drawing their own conclusions that ghosts caused it. Because nobody believes in witches anymore. Zelda cries and tells Sabrina that none of the kids will come to their house to get candy. Hilda says relatably, "Good, all those kids won't be ringing the doorbell. I won't have to try to guess who everyone is either." Sabrina says that if everyone thinks her house is haunted, they'll get tons of kids because people want to be scared on Halloween. Sabrina summons webs, Zelda summons a fake ghost, Hilda makes hands come out of the wall, and Sabrina creates a hidden trap door to drop kids down a slide into a pile of fresh donuts and cider. That's surprisingly sweet and definitely necessary to make up for all of the scaring. Hilda says recklessly that they'll advertise by broom, but thankfully she doesn't mean that she'll make sure she's seen directly. Instead, they spell out the advertisement in the sky. The story might as well have moved on to the final two panels after that, because there's no interesting twists in the last few panels. Maybe we should have only seen what they summoned when we were seeing the kids experience it. This story was about Zelda finding out that kids think her house is haunted, and I have to come to my own conclusion about why, and Sabrina cheers her up and says that people would want to go to a haunted house for Halloween. So the witches use magic for it and get a lot of kids to show up and eat donuts afterwards, which are fortunately there to make up for all the scaring. Little Archie, issue 102, All Those Charms. Archie sees Betty carrying a bunch of heavy books to the supply room for Grundy, and Archie only offers to carry Veronica's books even though she's got less of them to suck up to her because they've got a date tonight. Veronica proves she doesn't care about Betty, and Archie says Veronica's not as strong as her, and I have to assume that when Betty got offended by Veronica saying she'll go lift weights at the gym later, she's offended because she's being called not girly, when she shouldn't be insulted for getting healthier. Betty walks into the door with some books, and Sabrina feels sorry for her and thinks that she'd love to help her win Archie with magic, but uncharacteristically, she suddenly thinks that she'd better mind her own business. But then she turns around in the very next panel and summons a bracelet to make all of the guys crazy about Betty. She can't resist temptation, or think ahead in the slightest. Of course she once wants all of the boys fighting over her. Betty agrees to wear it out of desperation. In spite of that, at first she assumes Archie just wants her to carry books, and she says she doesn't feel like it today. She's happy at the bracelet working. Then Archie and his friends fight over her. Why is there a zap when Jughead says the bracelet smells like a burger? Then a bully kicks the guys away and hugs her too tightly, so Betty throws away the bracelet, and thankfully none of the guys remember this. Betty apologizes to Sabrina, and the story ends with Grundy actually appreciating the various men at the school wanting to date her. It just ends there when she shouldn't like seeing them injure each other fighting over her. We know Sabrina would see this and get the bracelet back, so ending there just saves time. This story's about Sabrina overthinking things and giving Betty a bracelet to attract every boy when she knows that she only wants Archie, and just thought that she should mind her own business. It should have been obvious to her right away that she wouldn't want them to all fight over her and keep her from enjoying being with Archie. Sabrina doesn't even get to correct the mistake herself because Betty has to throw it off herself. Sabrina should have supervised her. Little Archie, issue 103, The Real Spirit. A few days before Christmas, Sabrina and Zelda walk around the mall complimenting Christmas, and Zelda says despite Sabrina holding a gift that she doesn't do shopping. She says she just asks Santa for everything as opposed to using magic to zap up gifts herself faster. Some adults laugh at her for believing in Santa, and a kid on a mall Santa's lap realistically complains that he didn't get what he wanted last Christmas. Zelda summons a train for the kid in front of everyone recklessly and spends some time giving the kids what they want for Christmas, saving their parents money. Wouldn't this be caught on a mall camera? I guess spy witches erase the footage because this stuff would be happening all the time. Despite her not hesitating to give a kid a train when he doesn't have a conductor's license, she says she should have found out if the kid's mother would let him keep the pony. The mall Santa says he'd better put his glasses back on, despite the fact that he also heard everything. Zelda then finds out that the mall Santa is just a guy in a suit. Why would he reveal that to someone in public? Aren't they not allowed to do that? She cries and says she doesn't believe in anything anymore. And someone takes a picture of her and they decide to put that on the front page and not all of the magic she was doing. Probably because they'd be accused of faking it. Why would they put that on the front page? What a slow news day. Hilda warns Zelda that if she goes outside, she'll be laughed at. But they know they could use magic to fix this problem. Can't these full-grown witches erase memories? On Christmas Eve, Zelda helps Santa give out gifts, and I promptly wonder why she had that reaction to the mall Santa then. This was a nice story about Zelda using magic to give kids some Christmas gifts early. We don't have to see the depressing results she should have predicted of her giving kids a train and pony. But you could just watch a Simpsons episode to see how badly the pony could go. Then somehow Zelda cries when she sees that the mall Santa isn't a real Santa, just to help Santa out later like nothing ever happened. Why would that make it on the front page of the newspaper? Would society have a rule against that to keep kids from finding out? Little Archie issue 104 of Free Ski. Sabrina says that if it's snowing again, that guarantees no school tomorrow. Hilda wants to go skiing and gives Zelda skis when Zelda never skied before. Somehow Zelda wastes the time saying that the living room can't be skied in. Of course, they plan on going to the slopes, and she should have known that. Zelda says that it's too cold to fly around in the winter, and Hilda changes the broom into a flying cabin with the heater. Sabrina tells Salem she'll go with him in their model, and a dog can apparently talk and magically figures out right away what's really flying in the sky despite being too far away. The only explanation is that he's a witch who is turned into an intelligent animal as a punishment, and he's already familiar with Sabrina's family. After that big-lipped alligator moment, Hilda decides to try to land on top of the mountain to avoid paying for a ski lift. But then karma hits her for trying to avoid paying because she does a bumpy landing, and she somehow forgot to put brakes in this, and it slides down the hill uncontrollably. Why would they think they can't just point to stop it? Instead, one of them says she should warn the skiers in some way other than shouting, and when a horn is suggested, Zelda summons a trumpet horn for no reason instead. Then a student driver sign gets summoned, and Zelda jumps because the sign said ski jump. If anything, you'd think it'd be Sabrina who'd get all the naive, stupid moments. Not an old, experienced witch. It's entertaining to see their plane go downhill at least. Luckily, despite it turning upside down, it lands in the snow upright. Sabrina asks Zelda if she's alright, but not Hilda for some reason. Someone states the obvious for no reason, and Zelda asks if they're rich in a daze. While I'm relieved that Sabrina didn't get hurt, why wasn't she? Why was she the only one who thought to cast an invincibility spell and only did it for herself? Then they get a trophy for the world's jumping record. Conveniently, they did this in front of a guy with a trophy for that. The ants tell Sabrina they're going back up the slope without her to admire the ski instructor they saw on the way down, as them being pointlessly boy crazy is one of the many ways the comic was ahead of its time. This story is about the ants deciding to fly in a plane to the top of a ski mountain, and then when it starts sliding down the hill uncontrollably without brakes, when I'm not sure brakes would cancel out that momentum and gravity without being magical, there's an entertaining scene where they use magic some more. Why didn't any of the witches use a spell to slow their plane down? Instead, they get a trophy for jumping that they don't deserve because they cheated with magic to get in that situation. You'd think that if Hilda can summon the plane without brakes accidentally because she didn't think of them, it means she has to think about every component to summon it. But that can't be true because then she'd have to be an expert in knowing how a plane works to summon it. So why did her magic decide to leave out the brakes? Why would you have to think about it having brakes but not everything else? Her magic should have assumed she wanted brakes. That's not even getting into the obvious fact that they wouldn't have needed a plane in the first place because they could have just cast a spell on their flying brooms so that the broom would have a heat bubble so that it wouldn't be too cold to go out flying in the winter. You'd think that would be a part of the broom by default. Little Archie issue 105 for the birds. Sabrina gets offered a nice bowl of hot soup in the winter, and then Zelda feels sorry for a bird that looks cold, and she assumes it's hungry too. Sabrina's smart enough to use magic to help. She summons food, and Zelda smartly makes it hot to taste better. Sabrina says it'll get cold if it's put outside to eat. Hilda summons a feeding station, and Zelda makes it a birdhouse with windows. Hilda makes a heated bird bath in every room of it, and Jughead wonders what smells so good, conveniently deciding to visit Sabrina right now, when, sure, I guess he walks her to school every day, but only with the rest of his friends. I still don't imagine them to be such good friends that him being here makes sense. He wants a treat too, and somehow asks what their birdhouse is when it's obvious. Some birds fly to the house, but don't eat the treats. Maybe because they're not bird treats. Hilda plans on adding a bird restaurant, but then the bird treats end up gone, and while Sabrina's family ends the story happy, they're just blissfully unaware that Jughead predictably stole the treats. And the story ends with the birds planning on attacking him, which at least gave him some comeuppance. So all of that was for nothing, at least as far as we know, because we won't see them put any more treats in the birdhouse. This story was about Zelda wanting to help a hungry bird in the winter and going out of her way to make the best birdhouse ever for it, with no explanation given as to why there's so many birds here in the winter. And then Jughead shows up, with no explanation for why he decided to visit Sabrina, and eats all of the treats on the birds. So while it was mostly a nice story to see, it was all for nothing. Jughead's presence seeming arbitrary because we don't know how close he lives to Sabrina just makes it clear that Harvey should have been used for this instead, because if she had a boyfriend or best friend regularly coming to her house, it makes sense that he came over. And he is a big eater. But Harvey is redundant with Archie, with the only unique thing about him being that he likes sci-fi and dates Sabrina. But this is also a comic where Archie still dates Veronica, so why can't Harvey date Sabrina? Little Archie, issue 106, The Joker. Weatherby catches Reggie in his office and thanks him when he's lied to and sits on attack. Then Reggie acts nervous around Grundy too, and she gets a bucket of water falling on her. I wonder if he's actually innocent in a twist. Jughead tells Sabrina that Reggie is getting bounced out of school. She uses magic to make Grundy and Weatherby give Reggie another chance. If he's not innocent, they shouldn't. And this spell proves Sabrina has been able to change people's minds with magic on purpose all along. Weatherby reasons that he was the worst prankster at Reggie's age, and it turns out Grundy already knows. Reggie thanks them for the mercy, and Weatherby somehow thinks that telling Reggie about one of his childhood pranks is a good idea that won't guarantee that he'll do it. He tells him not to prank a teacher again. Reggie then only pretends to be sympathetic out of nowhere because the cookies he gives Sabrina have a sock in one of them. So Reggie ends up getting teleported to the school roof, and he somehow asks how when he's known Sabrina was a witch for a very long time. So Sabrina can teleport people in this comic. I just have to assume that she just learned she could do it. Maybe this was the first time she tried it because she was so mad she wished he would go there. Maybe she only recently got this power from her magic battery maturing. Either way, if you don't assume these things, you just wonder why she didn't do this stuff in the earlier stories. I thought the comic was trying to be balanced by implying that she couldn't use teleportation because she's a kid, but that was hard to believe anyways. This story was about Reggie pranking the adults who work at the school because he couldn't help himself, and Sabrina uses magic to make them decide not to expel him, even though she should know that would be better for everyone. I guess he only very recently started pranking the teachers, or it would have been this situation a lot earlier. Sabrina gets pranked as karma for making sure he'll keep tormenting Archie, because he was smart enough not to prank the teachers again at least. She punishes them, revealing that she can teleport people now. Does she know if she can warp herself now? I guess it's not fair to assume that against the later stories without her doing so. What took her so long? What took her so long to use magic to change people's minds? If she could instinctively think to cast a spell for that, why didn't she do it when people found out she's a witch? I guess she just found out she could do this off screen. Now the rest of the comic's gonna make less sense, making me wonder why she won't use these really overpowered abilities ever again. I'll have to assume she's not used to them enough to immediately think to use them. It is easy to buy that she's not comfortable with brainwashing.